I must admit I was surprised as well.
Imagine being Boris Becker. You have won Wimbledon 3 times. You have played in front of packed stadiums on every continent. You have commentated on some of the most electrically charged matches in the history of professional tennis. You have seen everything. And then one afternoon in Rome, a 20-year-old walks onto a clay court, and the noise that follows stops you mid-sentence. Not metaphorically, literally, mid-sentence. That is where this story starts, and I promise you, by the time we get to the end of it, you are going to understand why that moment meant a lot more than just a viral clip. The Rome Masters 2026, clay season. The Foro Italico, one of the most historically loaded tennis venues on the planet, marble statues lining the walkways, a central court that holds over 10,000 people, and a crowd that has seen enough tennis over the decades to know exactly what it is looking at. This is not a venue that gets easily impressed. And yet, something happened there this year that the regulars, the seasoned Roman tennis faithful, genuinely could not explain using any reference point they had. A section of the crowd became more than a section. It became a force. And the name at the center of it was Alex. Alex, 20 years old, born in Manila, carrying a flag that had never been planted in the soil of professional tennis quite like this before. Now, before we go any further, I need to make something clear, because a lot of the coverage around this moment got lazy and reduced the whole thing to a feel-good nationality story. Alex walking into Rome was not a surprise appearance. She was not a wild card handed a spot to add color to the draw. She arrived as a legitimate clay court threat, whose ranking had been climbing with the kind of quiet consistency that makes coaches in opposing camps take notes and say nothing publicly. Her trajectory into that tournament was built on real results, real progression, real tennis. The crowd did not show up for a symbol. They showed up because they had been watching closely, and what they had been watching had earned that level of belief. So let me give you the foundation, because the foundation matters. Alex was born on May 23, 2005 in Manila. She grew up in a country where tennis does not have the infrastructure of France or Spain, no deep funding pipelines, no academies pumping out 10 ranked players every generation, no national federation with the kind of budget that turns raw talent into polished professionals on a conveyor belt. What the Philippines has instead is something harder to manufacture and honestly more interesting to watch, which is a concentrated, almost tribal intensity of emotional investment in the athletes who break through. And Alex broke through early. In 2022, she became the first Filipino player in history to win a Grand Slam title when she took the US Open girls singles. Read that sentence again slowly. The first in history. That was not a minor milestone inside a small community. That was a cultural moment that reframed what Filipino tennis could look like. And it put Alex on a timeline that stopped being about potential and started being about execution. What happened after that junior title is actually the part of the story that does not get told enough. A lot of players win junior slams and then spend 3 or 4 years struggling to find their footing on the professional tour. The gap between junior tennis and adult professional tennis is brutal, and it swallows careers regularly. Alex did not disappear into that gap. She moved through the ITF circuit with speed and purpose, collected WTA ranking points methodically, and did something that genuinely surprised people who track these things closely. She demonstrated, on multiple clay surfaces across Europe, that her game was not specifically built for the hard courts where she had made her name as a junior. Her clay game had its own identity, and that identity was built on something deceptively simple, which is the ability to make opponents deeply uncomfortable without necessarily overpowering them. Watch Alex on clay, and what you notice first is the footwork. She retrieves balls that her opponents have already started celebrating. She gets to positions she has no business reaching, and then instead of just sending the ball back and surviving, she redirects the point. She constructs rallies rather than forcing them. And in that construction, she finds angles and depths that gradually pull players out of their preferred patterns. That is not a junior skill. That is a professional skill that some players spend their entire careers trying to develop and never fully get there. By the time the Rome calendar date arrived in 2026, she had already done enough across the clay swing to justify serious attention from analysts and opponents alike. And then there was the crowd. This is where the story becomes something bigger than a tennis story. The Filipino diaspora across Europe is enormous. Italy, Spain, Germany, the United Kingdom. There are Filipino communities in all of those countries. And in the weeks leading up to Rome 2026, something organized and deliberate started happening across social media platforms that serve those communities. People started coordinating. Travel arrangements, ticket purchases made in blocks, flags sourced and distributed at the gates. This was not a group of fans who happened to end up in the same place at the same time. This was a mobilization, structured, intentional, and driven by a collective feeling that this tournament, this year, was a moment worth showing up for physically. The result inside the Foro Italico was unlike anything the venue had experienced in the context of a match involving a player outside the very top of the rankings. Yellow and blue flags across sections of the crowd that kept expanding. Chants in Filipino cutting through the ambient noise of the stadium. A noise level that the regular Roman tennis audience found genuinely startling. And these are people who are not easily startled by atmosphere. What struck observers, and this detail matters, was that the atmosphere did not feel like an imported crowd attempting to take over a neutral space. It felt proportionate. It felt earned, because the crowd was responding to the tennis. Every winner Alex hit sent a wave through the stadium that rolled from one end to the other. Every retrieval she made on a point she had no right to still be competing in produced a reaction from neutral spectators who had not been closely following her. A reaction somewhere between disbelief and the specific electric feeling you get when you realize you are watching someone special before the rest of the world has fully caught up. That is the feeling that fills a stadium in a particular way. And Boris Becker felt it. Now, let me tell you about Becker for a second, because his reaction to all of this is not just a broadcast anecdote. It is a data point. 3 Wimbledon titles, including one at 17 years old, that remains one of the most genuinely shocking results in the tournament's history. Australian Open titles. A Davis Cup record with Germany that defined an entire era of that country's tennis identity. When Becker sits at a commentary desk, he brings something that you cannot learn from statistics or broadcast training, which is the instinctive pattern recognition of someone who has stood inside the pressure of the biggest matches and understood what was happening in real time. His knowledge of the sport has never been seriously questioned. He is one of the sharpest voices in European tennis broadcasting, and he has commentated on atmospheres that carried entire nations on their emotional shoulders. He has seen packed stadiums. He has felt the weight of crowd energy shift a match. None of that prepared him for what he walked into when Alex was on court at the Foro Italico. His delivery stopped mid-sentence. Broadcast viewers noticed it immediately. The clips spread within hours across tennis forums and social media, most of them carrying some version of the same caption, which was essentially that one of the most composed and opinionated voices in the sport had been visibly halted by the spectacle of a 20-year-old Filipino woman who had turned a Roman crowd into something that resembled less a tennis audience and more a unified living thing. The reaction to those clips divided predictably. People who had been following Alex closely found the moment moving and entirely logical. People who had not been paying attention to her career found it confusing and asked the obvious question, which was, why was this crowd this size and this loud and this coordinated for a player not yet sitting inside the top tier of the WTA rankings? That question is actually the most honest and interesting question in the entire story, and it deserves a real answer rather than a vague appeal to national pride. Filipino sports culture operates on an emotional frequency that is genuinely different to most Western tennis markets. It is not louder for the sake of being loud. It is more concentrated, more personally invested. When a Filipino athlete breaks through into a global arena, the community does not observe from a distance. It travels. It organizes. It shows up. Manny Pacquiao built a version of this across a decade of boxing. Carlos Eala demonstrated it in gymnastics at the Olympics. Alex is building it in tennis. And tennis, with its individual format and its global circuit and its year-round calendar of events in major European cities, gives Filipino fans more access points and more opportunities to physically be present than almost any other major sport does. The Rome crowd was not an emotional overflow that arrived without structure. It was the product of a fan base that had been waiting for a player like Alex for a long time. And when she arrived at a stage that finally matched the scale of their belief in her, they came. Becker recovered. To his credit, he recovered quickly. And what came after the pause was arguably more valuable than the pause itself. His subsequent commentary on Alex during the tournament was sharp and specific, and genuinely analytical, without falling into the hollow flattery that broadcasters sometimes default to when covering players from underrepresented tennis nations. He identified real patterns in her baseline construction. He talked about her court intelligence in terms that went beyond surface-level observation. And he made one comment in particular that I think deserves more attention than it received, which was that her ability to manage the energy of the crowd, both when it was completely with her and in the moments when pressure shifted against her, reflected a mental composure that most professional players take considerably longer to develop. That observation is not a compliment about her personality. It is a technical observation about competitive psychology, and it is the kind of thing that scouts and coaches and players themselves pay close attention to, because managing crowd energy is a skill, and doing it at 20 on one of the most atmospheric clay courts in the world, in a match that carries the weight of an entire nation's hopes, is genuinely difficult. And she handled it. Now, let me be honest about the tennis, because honesty is more useful than celebration when we are talking about a career that is still being built. Alex's game on clay is real. The speed, the retrieval, the tactical intelligence in long rallies, all of it is real, and all of it is at a level that justifies the attention she is receiving. But there are edges that still need work, and any genuine assessment of where she is and where she needs to go has to name them. Her transition from defense to offense in mid-court situations still carries a slight hesitation that top 10 opponents will identify and exploit given enough time in a match. Her serve has improved meaningfully, but it does not yet function as the kind of weapon that disrupts the rhythm of elite returners before the baseline exchanges even begin. Her second serve aggression under pressure across a full three-set match shows a pattern of dropping in a way that becomes readable. These are not death sentences for a career. Every player outside the top 10 has a version of this list. The question is always whether the player and the coaching team are addressing the right things at the right pace, and whether the competitive exposure is happening fast enough to force those adaptations in match conditions rather than only in practice. At 20, Alex still has time, but professional tennis burns through time faster than almost any sport on earth. And the players who understand that reality early are the ones whose careers shift from interesting to genuinely formidable. The evidence from Rome suggested that the pace of her development is reasonable, and that the clay season training block heading in had produced visible results. She moved better. Her decision-making under pressure was more decisive. The mid-court hesitation was still there, but it appeared less often and less severely than in earlier tournaments on the surface. Progress in tennis rarely looks dramatic in the moment. It accumulates in small margins across hundreds of matches. What Rome demonstrated was that the margins are moving the right direction. And so the crowd and the tennis were not two separate stories running alongside each other. They were the same story. The Filipino fans in the Foro Italico were not there to cheer a narrative. They were there because they had been watching Alex develop, and they could see, before the rankings fully reflected it, before the mainstream coverage caught up, that something significant was happening. They were early. Crowds often are. They read players in a way that data takes months to confirm, and what that Roman crowd was responding to was the recognition of a player who was becoming something the sport does not produce often, a genuine competitive force from a nation with none of the structural advantages that most tour players simply inherit by being born in the right country and falling into the right development system. Becker understood it by the end. His silence was not confusion about whether Alex was worth watching. It was the specific kind of pause that happens when an experienced observer encounters something that does not fit inside any existing template. Alex at Rome 2026 did not fit any existing template. The crowd did not fit. The entire atmosphere sat slightly outside the normal coordinates of a WTA clay court event. And that displacement was visible in real time on the broadcast, and it was honest, and it was significant. This is where the sport is going. New markets are not just providing audiences anymore. They are providing players. Those players are arriving with communities behind them that reshape what major tournaments sound and feel like in venues that have been hosting tennis for generations. What Alex and her fans brought to the Foro Italico this year was not noise for noise's sake. It was the arrival of a different kind of tennis story in one of the sport's most traditional spaces. And Alex is 20. The 2026 clay swing is not the ceiling. It is the floor. Players who develop this kind of tactical intelligence at this age on this surface, with this level of atmospheric pressure and competitive exposure, tend to make rapid jumps between 21 and 24. That is the window where the technical edges get addressed, where the ranking progression stops being surprising and starts being expected, where a player graduates from the description of promising into the description of dangerous. Alex is standing at the entrance of that window right now. Rome was not the story. Rome was the beginning of the story. And if you were in those stands or watching that broadcast when Becker went quiet, you felt it before anyone had written it down. That is what made it worth talking about.